This is episode 293 of the Rio Grande Foundation's Tipping Point, New Mexico. I'm Paul Gessing, president of the Rio Grande Foundation.
And I'm Wally Drangmeister.
This is New Mexico's free market think tank. You can find out more about the foundation at riograndefoundation.org. Wally, this week, a lot still going on here, and we've got a few things that are COVID related. Of course, everything is COVID related at this point because the entire economic situation is being affected not as much by the virus, thankfully, but the repercussions of some federal policies in particular. But we don't toot our horns very often around here. But I was looking through some old Twitter conversations, and I posted it up at the errorsoфenchantment.com site, hearkening back to March 24th of 2020, when Mayor Keller announced that the city was closing all of its playgrounds. I did not react particularly well to that. I, outlined some objections to it, said that we could get by with hand sanitizer and hand washing, understanding that every activity has inherent risk, and there's risk to being inside 24/7. Although the author of some responses to that tweet have deleted his tweets. It was the head of a government employee labor union here in Albuquerque who does a lot of work in Santa Fe, and he essentially called me a bad parent. So I felt that's why I blocked him, and then didn't find those tweets until much later, and that he had in fact deleted his tweets because presumably figured out he was wrong, because the CDC has announced, the COVID-19 really doesn't spread by surface contact. Unfortunately, like so much of this whole virus situation, the science filters slowly into the people's minds. It's easy to scare people. It's hard to bring them back and say, all these crazy things you've been doing for over a year, they really don't matter. Not everything, but
a lot of things.
In this case, surface cleaning or surface touch doesn't spread the virus.
Well, I was looking at the list of topics for the show today, and what occurred to me, Paul, was that, science is about hypothesis and testing, and then to see if your hypothesis is right. But what happens a lot in the COVID is hypotheses get turned into dogma. And it's like, and then, as you said, it's very difficult to adjust from there. And believe me, it was called the novel coronavirus, meaning it was new. We didn't know much about it. And so, at some point, maybe the surface thing was very important because my understanding is the common cold is transmitted that way. But here we are over a year later. It's much different. And yet I still see a heck of a lot of sanitizer in places. There's a jar of it virtually in front of every restaurant, every retail place that I go to. And then maybe we ought to just be outside a little bit more at these playgrounds that they initially wanted to close. We'd probably be all better off.
Yeah, I disobeyed. I did a little civil. It's not the first time in this whole situation, and certainly hasn't been the last. They put signs up, and I was so proud of my kids. They just ripped them out of the dirt and threw them. It was made Dad proud. But it was a novel situation. It was something that we didn't know a lot of factors, but we were pretty certain, as you can be from almost any situation. Now, kids, we knew early on that they weren't necessarily impacted very harshly by COVID. It's also pretty true that a lot of these viruses, unless you have a cut on your body, you're touching something, right, that's not going to be a way that viruses enter your system. Yes, if you touch something and then lick your hand or heaven forbid, small children might stick a finger in the nose. Those could be ways to spread the virus. But at least on this particular virus, the CDC now says really everything from going to church, as I do, and you spray down the pews after every service, to a lot of other dubious measures that I think really, we have the security theater at the airports. Now we have hygiene theater.
Yeah, we really do, and that is a good way to look at it. And Paul, I haven't studied this extensively, but one of the things I've been reading about is that some of the hand sanitizer has benzene in it, and so benzene is basically a hydrocarbon, but it has cancer-causing conditions, and so it's one of these things that when you look at these factors without looking at it from a point of view of trade-offs, it's inevitable that these things occur. And so, I'm not saying that I wouldn't have done the same thing from a policy point of view if I was in charge from the surfaces initially, but the bottom line is it's very difficult for them to change direction. It reminds me of a lot of federal programs, just to throw one out there, Head Start. Head Start's been a failure now for going on 30, 40 years, but the promise and premise of it is so positive that somehow we can't turn loose of it. I have a feeling we might get there with COVID with regard to hand sanitizer and, heaven forbid, masks, that we have to wear those everywhere, particularly outdoor in the fresh air of New Mexico. That's mine, that I really look forward to the day that one goes away.
I definitely agree, and we'll see how that situation
Don't hold
goes.
your breath, as they say.
Definitely don't hold your breath. Well, another more economics-oriented story with regard to COVID-19 is that New Mexico, well, first and foremost, the unemployment rate data came out from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This is February of 2021. No surprise, New Mexico is among the highest states. We're at the 5th highest in terms of unemployment. Other lockdown states include Hawaii, New York, or lockdown high unemployment, I should say. Blue states, Hawaii, New York, Connecticut, California, New Mexico, and we're tied with Nevada, which is both a blue state lockdown. Yes, it's moved definitely to the left.
And almost 100% tourism oriented
exactly,
from their economy
and
point of view.
That's the most important. And then you look at other states nearby, Texas at 6.9, as is Arizona. Those are well above normal times, but Texas and Arizona both have eliminated their mask mandates. They're starting to move towards full reopening. Colorado at 6.6%, Oklahoma at 4.4%, and Utah right down at the very bottom in terms of, or top, they have the second lowest unemployment rate in the entire nation to only South Dakota at 3%. So it's not unusual, first and foremost, that New Mexico performs poorly on unemployment rate. We tend to have a higher than average rate for a variety of reasons. Hawaii is a state that, like Nevada, really relies on tourism, and they have been extremely locked down, even more extreme than us here in New Mexico or California. So it's no surprise that they have such a high rate. What is surprising is how many businesses simply cannot find people to work. And we talked about this briefly last week, and maybe the media outlets are just monitoring this podcast to figure out what their marching orders for the week. We can dream, right?
Oh, I think that's what's happening. Wink, wink. But yes, but it's out there, Paul. And I'm not sure they listen to the podcast, but you've done blog posts, Errors of Enchantment, on this issue, and it's kind of starting to remind me of the economic concept of stagflation, where you have a stagnant economy and inflation. Well, here we have high unemployment, and yet a high number of jobs going wanting. And there's a reason for that, I think. What's your thought?
Well, I think the obvious reason that we have so many jobs available in a state like New Mexico with a high unemployment rate is that we have people who have gotten pretty comfortable collecting enhanced unemployment checks. And so combined with the $1,400 payments received recently and other payments, you have people who are not inclined to work. And it's one of the things that conservatives and good libertarians talk about economically, which is that it's not in humans' nature to necessarily desire to work. We will consume, we will, seek pleasure and enjoyment, but work is something that you need to kind of incentivize in a lot of people. And what too much government policy, the simplest way to tell a bad government policy is, does it disincentivize work? And, from everything from income taxes to subsidy payments and welfare checks. There are welfare programs that can incentivize work, like the earned income tax credit,
Right.
but there are too many government programs that are geared towards keeping people on the sidelines, and those are bad policies. Now, we've seen that in spades here in COVID, and it's one of the many reasons why we oppose the $1.9 trillion Biden-Bucks stimulus package that just came out, because we've been through this for a year now with the stimulus, with the COVID-19. The last thing we need is more quote-unquote stimulus, more debt, and more reasons for people to stay home, stay out of the workforce. It's just not good policy. It never was.
No, and it's one of my favorite concepts in economics is you don't get what you want, you get what you incentivize. And in this case, yeah, in a lot of cases, money's coming in. Are they making as much on unemployment and with the Biden bucks as they would have before? No, but it's one of those, until that money runs out, there's not going to be the incentive. So it's kind of maybe not a full vacation, but you're kind of going to semi-vacation mode. The other issue coming out of that, though, is sometimes it's hard to restart. Sometimes some bad, and I will call that, this just from a common point of view, bad habits creep in. But there are people that get into a place where they maybe start to drink a little bit too much, use too many drugs, get into other habits that don't benefit them in the long run. It's hard for them to emerge. Now, but at least marijuana is a very highly motivating drug. So when that's legalized, wink, wink, we'll have more. Since I brought that up, I'll just dismiss that. I don't think that's going to be the case at all. I don't think it's going to make any impact on anything. I think everyone who already gets marijuana largely does get it. We have so many, well over 100,000 people on our medical plan. But yes, we do have this interesting situation. How long will it take? And then the other factor, Paul, that you didn't mention is there are people in certain industries and parts of the hospitality industry that wanted to keep working, and there were jobs in other places. And so I think we've seen an exodus of certain types of skilled people in the hospitality industry, chefs, managers, even down to basic housekeepers that could get work elsewhere. They're like, hey, we're out of here. And so how long will it take for that to recover? How big of an issue that is, I'm not sure. But there we are. We're not 48th or 49th, but we're 47th on that unemployment list. And it'll be interesting to see how long it takes us to get off of that. The last time we were there, it took almost a decade to recover.
Yeah. And, I'm perusing, we look at these businesses, and there are still, of course, businesses that have been shut down. So in addition to people moving out of state, there remain some hospitality businesses. I'm looking at the Hinkle Family Fun Center site. Google says they're open now, but the actual website says stay tuned for reopening date. These kinds of low-wage jobs are often, they're the most high profile, ironically. When you have large numbers of McDonald's and Wendy's and Hinkle Family Fun Centers and Cliffs looking for people to work there, these are businesses that advertise on the side of roads that you pass by them. They need large number of relatively low-skilled workers, but it's not just those folks who are looking for people. Fidelity, I understand, has hundreds of job openings at their center at Mesa del Sol, for example. And but at one of the Sonics here in town, and this was covered by Channel 4 KOB, although Channel 13 and Channel 7 have all done stories about the lack of workers. I love the Sonic. We are short-staffed. This is a sign at a Sonic here locally. Please be patient, in bold, with the staff that did show up. So all that in bold. No one wants to work anymore, in regular print. I'm like, these people ultimately, whatever their training, whatever their educational attainment, they understand intuitively incentives. And, quite frankly, people have been talking about inflation and the likely rides towards higher and higher costs. That is certainly going to be felt, I believe. It's already being felt in housing and construction and some other industries, but businesses are going to have to figure out, well, do I want to dramatically inflate my wages in order to reopen and get back to work and earning money? Or are we going to be able to earn the money and get back to work at all because of the lack of workers or the amount of pay that they have to come up with to pay them? So lots of interesting factors there, Wally. So I guess it's two I told you so's in the first 15 or so minutes of this episode. One is the surface contact at the parks, and the other is the stimulus not helping actually get people back to the workforce. So
Yeah, and you know what, Paul, the stimulus and extension and enhanced unemployment benefits, it's not like the country hasn't been through that before and seen that. So, some people might call this an unexpected outcome or weren't seeing this coming, but it's one of those, you don't have to be much of an economic historian to see that this has happened many times in the United States. So.
Hey! Now you're denigrating my
I know. I was saying
economics
me.
knowledge.
I was saying me.
Oh, okay,
I was saying
okay.
me. It's one of those. You don't. Yeah, just pay attention a little bit, and you've seen that this has happened a lot. So.
Yeah. One thing that I hadn't included in the show notes, but this is from the Capital Confidential. It's a project of the Mackinac Center, the sister think tank of ours in Michigan. And the headline is Whitmer administration, face masks for everyone, semicolon, they'll let you know when they can come off. And I think it's worth noting in this article. So it's from April 14th, so a very recent article. And it's worth noting that in many ways, Michelle Lujan Grisham has had a few spirit animals around in terms of her COVID policies. Mm-hmm. Definitely the governor of Michigan is somebody who, as a blue governor, Democrat governor, has really kept her state locked down. Gavin Newsom has, but with the recall effort, there's been pushback there. Let's just say that Governor Gretchen Whitmer is one of the people preaching from the same playbook as or hymn book as Lujan Grisham. And I'll read this briefly. The mandate is spelled out in draft rules posted by the Michigan Occupational Safety and Health Administration. The rules, once formalized, would replace that state's current emergency orders. And the idea is, under the draft rules, a gym, bowling alley, or other covered facility that is full of vaccinated customers would still have to require its patrons to wear face masks. Also, under the proposed rules, fans at sporting events would have to wear masks. And it talks about just how this is the new normal, quote unquote, that they are pushing. And it talks about employers having to wear masks in certain industries, bars and restaurants, kind of where we are now with people seated at tables able to remove them, but the wait staff, et cetera. It really, this is, I fear, where people in New Mexico are heading based on the governor and her political inclinations. She may pull back on her own emergency powers, but do this through some kind of rulemaking body. And I don't know exactly how that differs and is like Michigan, but this is totally what I could see our governor doing here in New Mexico.
Well, I hope not. Let's just say, I hope not. And as I said many times, outside in sparsely populated areas is I think the first that has to go. And again, talking about trade-offs between policies, they're like, oh, it's fine to exercise. It's like, it with a mask on. It's like it is not. You know what I
Right.
mean? It's one of those. It is uncomfortable. It reduces oxygen. It increases the carbon dioxide in your system. And out there on the trail, whether it be running or biking, mountain biking, I see a few people on, but also they do the almost obligatory mask salute, Paul. They'll pull the mask up when somebody's around and pull it off the minute they pass each other.
Yeah, well, of course, we shall see what Lujan Grisham has in store and how much of this she can just keep in place from the emergency perspective, or if she might try some regulatory move towards, uh, keeping some of the mask mandates and some of these other policies in place.
Well, and back to the science, how well is it working? It's one of those Michigan.
Right.
You look at the charts, and I'm not one that says there's no impact on mass, but boy, if it were only the panacea that it's portrayed to be from some of these emergency and now it sounds like longer term issues, we'd be in good shape, but we're not due to mass. I don't think.
And again, on that note, the isotopes, of course, here in Albuquerque, and I think they're appealing to the rest of the state. The Albuquerque isotopes are that something that was very exciting that is returning for this year. Now, this could all change pending. We're in yellow right now.
Right.
On Wednesday, we're going to find out whether, miracle of miracles, Bernalillo County might finally move into the green or, heaven forbid, turquoise. Uh, but they're talking about 25% capacity at the Isotopes Park to 50% having that done. They're going to change a lot of processes in place. You'll have to wear a mask except while eating or drinking, which again, if you're vaccinated, you don't need a mask. I'm just sorry.
And you're
also
outside and outside. Yep.
Right. And the other thing is that my favorite seating area, the berm, will be closed. That's where, with smaller children who
sit on the grass, roll down the hill.
yeah, not necessarily huge baseball fans, unfortunately.
Yeah.
6 or 7 innings is a lot to ask, let alone a 9-inning Isotopes game. I presume that means that the little rides out in the outfield will also be shut down, although we don't know. I think the upshot for me is that while I am happy to see the Isotopes returning, the guessing family will likely not be returning to Isotopes Park, at least until areas like the berm are open. You can always fake it. I mean, 9 innings is a long time for 1 beer or 2 beers, but you can always be nipping at that thing for a very long time. It might be a little warm by the end of 9 innings, but that's your loophole right there to sit there and drink something. But it's yet another thing that you hoped as of last year. We knew it was unfortunate. We lost the Isotopes for a year last year, but when it comes back, it's not going to be anything like what we would have seen in 2019 or previous years. So, very.
Oh, and Paul, now
stuff.
do the players have to wear masks on the field? Have you seen that? Because they don't in the majors.
I cannot imagine that they will require.
Yeah, I certainly hope not.
Of course, just showing how hypocritical this all is. The high school and young kids playing here in their sporting events. You've seen pictures in the paper of them having to wear masks, and
including cross country. So
yeah, and I did see a study. It's not just personal experience, which of course is great, but a study indicating that no, masks do have serious impacts on your ability to breathe and perform in an athletic setting. Anyone who's actually tried to, and I told the story of doing this one time where I'm fortunate to have some opportunities to work out independent of mainstream facilities, but I did go to a mainstream gymnasium facility, and sure enough, had to wear a mask, I can say that it was maybe not worn correctly for very long. But yeah, so I suspect that the players will not be wearing masks, but it won't be the old kind of vibe at Isotopes Park, and a lot of changes, most of them for the worse. Wally, we have a new superintendent at Albuquerque Public Schools, and he got his contract signed this week. Scott Elder has worked at APS since 1991. That is a good long time to be an employee anywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. He's been there a long time.
Yeah.
And now he's at the helm.
Yeah, and details were disclosed this week when they signed the contract for Elder, and it got a write-up in the Albuquerque Journal, and I thought the Journal did a pretty good job. It's a 7-page document, again, errorsoфenchantment.com. Of course, we know APS is not a particularly high-performing district, and Elder, just from a hiring perspective, my old rule in sports is if your team is doing really well and maybe the coach retires or leaves for a better opportunity, which happens a lot in college athletics, where you get, say the Aggies go to the NCAA tournament a few years in a row. Well, the coach is likely to leave and go take a different job. Well, do you then hire internally because you have a successful program, or do you go outside the program for that person? My rule is, when you're having success, if you have somebody who's bought into that culture, you generally go inside. When you don't have success, you go outside.
Now, I have a question about APS, Paul. How do we evaluate success? There really are two polar opposite views on that, in my opinion, and that is, do you evaluate it based on academic achievement of the students in APS? That's one. Or do you evaluate it on the compensation and benefits of the teachers involved? That's the other. And it doesn't seem like there's a whole heck of a lot in between those 2 points of view.
Yeah, well, I obviously believe that student outcomes should be of primary importance with regard to any judgment on not just teachers, but administrators and whatnot. The contract is clear, and there is nothing relating to student performance or achievement.
Nothing, not even
Nothing.
Not even a small, just nothing. Not raise the rates a little bit and we'll give you a little extra bonus. Nothing in there. All right.
And in addition, I would add another category for potential improvement and growth. And certainly, the data were clear pre-COVID. Albuquerque Public Schools had been hemorrhaging students as a general rule. The population had been going way down. Now, you can certainly say, well, that is a function of the aging of New Mexico, the aging of Albuquerque, and that issue is real, and it's something that's definitely going to impact the number of students served by the district. COVID has dramatically hastened the reduction in student population at APS, and I don't know. I haven't checked for other school districts. In fact, I haven't seen actual data from APS. I can just talk from personal experience that we know that students are finding new options. We talked last week about kids in the classroom, and while some of them may return in the fall, your student population is going to be, taking already a decline, and it's really going to nosedive at APS. So you would think that might be another way to incentivize Mr. Elder to increase, if not performance, at least the interest or the desire of parents to send their kids to Albuquerque Public Schools. Again, that's not in this document whatsoever. So we'll talk a little bit about what is in the document, but I wanted to give you a chance to comment on that.
Well, yeah, no, it is disappointing that that's there. And, it's one of those, we've heard from APS superintendents over the years, the proverbial, this is a big ship. It takes years to turn. But those years come and go and come and go and come and go, and it doesn't seem like that it ever happens. And I certainly wish Mr. Elder well in this job. And I wish it wasn't so important, the leadership. It's one of the things as you look at education policy, what makes schools good, what makes academic achievement good. I wish it wasn't so important, the administrative leadership of the superintendent and the principals of schools, but the data shows that that's very, very important, and so hopefully he will do well in that. But it's not good news that there's not even a nod to some sort of achievement, improvement or student growth or anything like that.
Yeah, and I think Elder. I don't really know him. I think I met him once or twice during the APS push for a tax increase. He was in charge of facilities and those kinds of things. He of course, was, because of the nature of his job, firmly on board with the tax increase. So we were on the opposite side of that issue. And I can't really imagine myself being on the side of APS and their bureaucracy in many issues. I think Elder is not the problem per se. He's a symptom of the problem, and the big problem comes from the people we elect to the school board, and they don't face the same. Taking the sports metaphor and diverging it quite a bit. In sports, you always have the goal of competing at the upper echelons of whatever league you're in. And yeah, maybe the Lobos basketball team in their primes isn't going to win a national championship, but getting to the Sweet 16, going to a Final Four, those are among the goals initially that they are pushing for. And you have very strong incentives to want to bring leaders in that are interested in changing the system and getting to that august level. I don't think the school board that we have now in place, and quite frankly, have had similar school boards for years, they really care. You mentioned teacher salaries and kind of taking care of teachers. I'm not saying they do that effectively, but definitely the unions and their interests have been taken care of over the decades. This COVID situation, one of the positives, and when we talk to Corey DeAngelis, we read about stories in other states where they're enacting school choice and big reforms. That's where the change is going to have to come. So we've got school board elections this November. I think folks need to not only sign up to run, but make sure they're aware of who the quote unquote incumbents or the incumbent philosophies are, being discussed and led by, and who the reformers are, and offer our support to people who are ready to reform that system. Because, even if Elder was some big reformer, new, fresh, outside voice, he's going to require somebody in that system to help. And,
to support that.
Yeah.
And yes, there's no question. You don't hire somebody with 30 years of experience in your organization and expect him to make a massive change in things.
Right.
It's just not how things work. And then you brought up another issue that's going to be hitting now K through 12, that's really been hitting higher education in New Mexico now for a number of years, and that is not as many students as we used to have. And so, there are issues. Bureaucracies and large organizations don't have an easy time adjusting to change in their number of employees and the programs and the processes they use. So yeah, that's something else. It'll be interesting to see if, a couple of years from now, we'll have things recovered and the COVID's a distant memory, and it may be somewhere in between. But the other extreme is, will it be this kind of strategic shift to where the number and the percentage of students in the traditional public education system goes down and maybe recovers over the long term, if ever, may never recover?
Yeah, well, we've got, you don't get to be an employee at a entity, especially a government bureaucracy, for 30 years by rocking the boat. There's that. We have a declining student population at a time when we have a massive infusion, probably unprecedented, at least in the time, 15 years I've been involved in public policy in New Mexico. Maybe there have been more infusions of money into the school systems, but you have that. So you have more money for less students. You have this gentleman coming in and trying to take the school district in a similar direction. It's not going to be a very dramatic change if he changes anything. He's going to earn $225,000 annually with 22 paid leave days, use of a car from the district, a $500 monthly allowance for expenses. Those are fairly routine. He's obviously, as somebody who's been in that district for so long, in the ERB pension system, which is very generous, Education Retirement Board. He will receive contributions to some kind of personal retirement account starting at $50,000 at the end of the 2021-22 school year. That goes to 55 and then 60 over the 3-year span. So that's money that he'll control in his own retirement account. And of course, he will have mandatory binding arbitration that the district will pay for in case of any disputes, not to mention zero in the way of triggers for success or any achievement, whether it's keeping students in the school or improving results of the school. So APS already spending $18,500 per student based on their annual budget and the number of students. I expect that as soon as 2021-2022 school year, that budget could be over $20,000 per student, which is pretty astonishing. You're talking about, big city, New York, Washington, D.C. type numbers of spending. But with the declining student population and the influx of money, I suspect we will see that kind of situation unfold. So a lot of fascinating stuff happening at APS, and this contract is the latest issue. I wish Elder the best of luck, but my daughter will be in a charter school. My other two will be in Catholic school. So he will have limited relevancy to my personal life and my kids' educations. And that's when two of them were in school in a traditional public school prior to this. So another story, and more or less final story as we wrap up. Of all the things that you would expect Deb Haaland to do, you would not expect her department, the Interior Department, to shortchange the state of New Mexico when it comes to conservation dollars. Now, this is, as so much with federal government is, it's complicated, but there is legislation in place that was passed and signed under President Trump that it's called the Great American Outdoors Act. And it essentially takes money directly from federal oil and natural gas royalties and dedicates them to maintenance and improving essentially the experience of people visiting federal public lands around the country. $1.6 billion was just announced in deferred maintenance funding for public lands nationwide by Haaland and the Interior Department. And New Mexico will receive $6.8 million. That again, $1.6 billion created and spent, $6.8 million coming to New Mexico. And we contribute $1.35 billion in royalties. So out of $1.6 billion, presumably they match the deferred maintenance number to the what they have available. But we contributed $1.35 billion, and we're getting back $6.8 million, which is just absurd and astonishing. This is directly from the Western Energy Alliance, Kathleen Scamma, her organization. it just blows my mind that New Mexico is not just not getting our fair share. We are getting a paltry sum from a department managed by a New Mexican with money that is much of which is contributed by New Mexico.
Yes, and one of two things occurs here. If we look at the states and Virginia, North Carolina, their number or their acreage, square miles, however you want to calculate it, of public lands pales compared to New Mexico. So a couple of things came to mind. Is it that we've been doing so great that all of our stuff here in New Mexico is in great shape and they've been suffering? Or is this some political shortcoming where whoever was maneuvering this dollars, we got outmaneuvered here in New Mexico? You might call that from each according to his ability to each according to his need, and evidently maybe we didn't need as much. That seems far-fetched, but it could be the case. But yeah, we're way, way, way out of line. And like I say, Virginia does not have that much public land compared to New Mexico by, they have a small fraction compared to New Mexico.
Yeah, I'll run through some of these numbers again. This is at heirsofenchantment.com, but posted from Western Energy Alliance. Again, New Mexico will get $6.8 million. We have, like you said, plenty of federal land. Over 40+% of New Mexico is managed by the federal government. We have sites like Chaco Canyon and Aztec Ruins that require some maintenance and need that additional money. But Virginia, $247.5 million. That's what they get. They don't produce any oil and gas, at least not from a federal lands perspective. Remember, this is money that's on federal lands. Of course, that is going to, New Mexico's share is going to shrink in the near future if Biden keeps this moratorium in place. North Carolina, $153.8 million. New York, $50.5 million. Washington, $50.3. New Jersey, $28 million. Massachusetts, $25, and Oregon, $12.5 million. All surpassing New Mexico dramatically. Many of those states have very limited federal lands, if at all. And, of course, New Mexico contributes far and away the most money to that fund. So very, I think, annoying and questionable in terms of why New Mexico is losing out. Is it Deb Haaland? I mean, she's only been there for a little while. Is it coming straight from the Biden administration? What is exactly causing this? We don't know, but it seems very unfair to the Land of Enchantment.
Yeah, well, without a doubt. And this will be interesting to see if there's some analysis where we learn where and how this was put together in the coming weeks.
And real quickly, we've got a few minutes. There's, we talk about it with Grover Norquist in the podcast last week, but one of Biden's big issues is supposedly infrastructure now with this $2 trillion stimulus / infrastructure bill, the American Jobs Plan. And I just wanted to quickly run through a few ideas that are worth considering as we discuss infrastructure. Now, this $2 trillion bill, only 7% of it is allocated for bridges, highways, roads, ports, waterways, and airports. $157 billion out of a $2 billion bill. If you expand the definition to high-speed broadband and electric vehicles, you get up to 24%. But this is not an infrastructure bill. However, we do recognize at the Rio Grande Foundation that there are things we could do at the federal level. We're going to talk about federal specifically to improve infrastructure, starting with the easiest thing, the most logical thing to do.
Yeah, simple and logical. Not easy.
Yeah, is to eliminate the racist Davis-Bacon prevailing wage law, which jacks up the cost of public works projects. We have a mini Davis-Bacon law in New Mexico. Federal Davis-Bacon does much the same thing on money, projects that get federal money. You jack up the price of those projects, specifically the labor. There have been studies of this. The exact numbers are hard to come by, but you could save billions of dollars a year, or you could spend those billions in ways that get you much more investment in transportation infrastructure if you eliminate Davis-Bacon. Of course, this is a big labor giveaway bill from Biden. The last thing he's going to do is go after his allies in labor to address Davis-Bacon. The federal government also diverts about 20% of federal gas tax funds, $8 billion annually, to transit and other non-highway uses. If you're going to levy a tax that's supposedly a user fee, it would make sense to allocate that money to at least the roads and bridges that are paying it. And then, transit and other things, you can try to fund those catch as catch can. Of course, as we see, mass transit doesn't get the job done at crunch time in New Mexico or around the country. Permitting delays, this is a nonpartisan issue. We talked to a gentleman from Common Good. They estimated that delaying the start of all U.S. public infrastructure projects by 6 years would cost $3.7 trillion. So I don't know what exactly they base that on, except for delay in building projects and permitting costs time and money. Time is money, and you delay those projects through onerous permitting.
And then you get inflation in the project
Yeah.
cost. The project cost never goes down if you delay it a number of years. So
Exactly. And then finally, as the Biden administration and here in New Mexico, they push for greater use of electric vehicles. Quite frankly, we need some way to derive funds from the electric vehicles on the roads to maintain the roads and build the roads. They are benefiting. Of course, they're getting a raft of subsidies elsewhere, tax credits and all kinds of things. So it probably would behoove the federal government to just eliminate those as a starting point, eliminating the mandates, let people buy electric vehicles if they want to buy them. But as they do become more popular, you should require them to put something into the roads that we all drive on, including electric vehicles. So I'm not expecting the Biden administration to pick up any of these ideas because they always run counter to exactly what they're doing, which seems to just be spending massive quantities of money. But
hope for the best.
Yeah, there are plenty of ideas out there that could address infrastructure. All right, well, we're going to leave it there. Thanks for listening to this week's episode. Find all episodes at tippingpointnm.com or at the Rio Grande Foundation's YouTube channel. Subscribe to this show at Apple, Stitcher, or have your Google Home play Tipping Point New Mexico. Thanks to Path 3 Marketing for producing this show.